If it feels hard, you might think you're doing something wrong. That's the lie most people believe. And it's the reason they quit too early. Because from the moment things get uncomfortable, the brain looks for an exit. It tells you to slow down, to reconsider, to find something easier. But here's what no one tells you: easy is crowded. Easy is familiar. Easy is where dreams go to die quietly. Hard is different. Hard is resistance. Hard is friction. Hard is the signal that you've finally stepped outside the version of life that keeps you average. Every meaningful upgrade, financial, physical, mental, or personal, comes with pressure. And pressure isn't punishment. It's proof. The reason this feels heavy is because you're lifting something you've never lifted before. The reason it feels slow is because you're building something real. And the reason most people never get what they want is because they mistake discomfort for danger. Growth doesn't announce itself politely. It challenges you, it tests your patience. It forces you to decide who you are when motivation disappears and effort remains. So if right now it feels hard, good, that means you're early. That means you're stretching. That means you're exactly where progress begins. Most people are conditioned to believe that difficulty is a warning sign. From an early age, we are taught that if something feels hard, frustrating, or confusing, it must mean we are not good at it, that we chose the wrong path, or that we should look for an easier alternative. This conditioning creates a dangerous reflex. The moment resistance appears, we interpret it as failure. But in reality, difficulty is not a signal to retreat. It is evidence that you are operating at the edge of your current capacity. Growth only happens at that edge. When something feels easy, it usually means one of two things. Either you have done it so many times that it no longer challenges you, or the task itself does not require you to change. In both cases, there is no expansion. No new skills are built, no new standards are formed, and no new identity is created. Difficulty, on the other hand, forces adaptation. It demands that you think differently, act with more discipline, and confront weaknesses you could previously ignore. That friction is not accidental. It is the mechanism through which progress is made. Hard work often feels wrong because it exposes gaps between who you are and who you need to become. When you attempt something meaningful, those gaps surface immediately. You notice impatience, self-doubt, lack of skill, lack of stamina, lack of consistency. The discomfort does not come from the task itself as much as from the realization that your current version is insufficient for the outcome you want. Many people misinterpret this moment as a sign they are unqualified, when it is actually proof they are in the correct arena. Difficulty also serves as a filter. If success were comfortable, everyone would have it. The reason valuable outcomes are rare is because the process required to achieve them repels most people. Hardness eliminates the uncommitted. It weeds out those who want the result without paying the price. When you experience resistance, you are standing at the same checkpoint where most people turn around. Choosing to continue is what separates those who make progress from those who rationalize quitting. There is also a time component that amplifies this misunderstanding. In the early stages of any worthwhile pursuit, effort is high and results are low. This creates a psychological imbalance where the work feels heavy and the reward feels distant. People expect difficulty to come later after success, but it usually comes first. The initial struggle is the entrance fee. If you expect ease at the beginning, you will abandon the process before the compounding effects have time to work in your favor. Reframing difficulty changes how you respond to it. Instead of asking, "Why is this so hard?" the better question becomes, what is this difficulty trying to teach me? Resistance provides feedback. It points directly to the skill, habit, or mindset you need to develop next. When you view difficulty as information rather than punishment, it becomes useful rather than discouraging. The people who eventually win are not the ones who avoid hard things. They are the ones who stop being surprised by them. They expect resistance. They normalize it. They understand that feeling overwhelmed, uncertain, or stretched is not a sign of misalignment, but a predictable phase of forward movement. Over time, their tolerance for difficulty increases, not because things get easier, but because they become stronger, more capable, and more disciplined in the face of pressure, continuing forward while the work demands more than they feel ready to give. The comfort trap is subtle because it feels safe, reasonable, and justified. Comfort does not announce itself as stagnation. It presents itself as balance, stability, and self-care. It convinces people that avoiding stress is the same as avoiding failure, when in reality it is often avoiding growth. The problem with comfort is not that it feels good, but that it quietly locks you into the same level of results while giving the illusion that you are protecting yourself. When life becomes comfortable, effort drops just enough to remove urgency. You still work, but only within limits you already know you can handle. You still set goals, but they are carefully sized to avoid discomfort. Over time, this creates a plateau where progress slows so gradually that you barely notice it happening. Weeks turn into months, and months into years, and nothing meaningfully changes. Comfort does not stop motion, it just ensures that motion goes in circles. Easy paths are attractive because they minimize short-term pain. They offer predictability and control, which the human brain craves. But predictability also means repetition, and repetition without challenge leads to decay. Skills dull when they are not pushed. Discipline weakens when it is not tested. Confidence erodes when it is built only on tasks you already know how to complete. The absence of struggle is not neutral, it is regressive. The comfort trap is especially dangerous because it rewards you immediately. You feel less stressed, less anxious, and less exposed. Those feelings act as positive reinforcement, teaching your brain that avoidance equals relief. But what you are really reinforcing is a pattern of choosing short-term comfort over long-term capability. Each time you avoid a hard conversation, a demanding goal, or a risky decision, you strengthen the habit of retreat. Eventually, even moderate challenges begin to feel overwhelming because your tolerance for discomfort has steadily declined. Another consequence of comfort is identity stagnation. Growth requires becoming someone new, and becoming someone new requires letting go of who you currently are. Comfort keeps you anchored to a familiar identity, even if that identity no longer serves your ambitions. You start defining yourself by what you can manage instead of what you could become. The longer you stay comfortable, the more threatening change feels, not because it is objectively harder, but because you have trained yourself to avoid strain. Comfort also distorts your perception of effort. When you operate below your potential for long enough, normal levels of work begin to feel extreme. Tasks that once felt manageable now feel exhausting. This creates a false narrative that you are burnt out, overworked, when in reality you are under-challenged. The mind interprets unused capacity as fatigue, not because you are doing too much, but because you are doing too little of what demands focus and intensity. The irony is that comfort rarely delivers the security it promises. The world continues to change regardless of how stable your routines feel. Skills become outdated, markets shift, and opportunities disappear. When change eventually forces itself upon you, the lack of prior struggle becomes a liability. Those who avoided difficulty are less prepared to handle it when it is no longer optional. Breaking free from the comfort trap requires recognizing that ease is not the goal. Capacity is. The aim is not to live without pressure, but to build the ability to handle more of it. Growth begins the moment you choose the harder option, not because it is enjoyable, but because it expands what you are capable of tolerating, producing forward momentum, while others remain protected, comfortable, and still. Most people experience resistance and immediately attach emotion to it. Frustration becomes failure, confusion becomes incompetence, slowness becomes proof that they are not built for the task. This emotional interpretation is what turns resistance into a stopping point. But resistance is not a verdict, it is feedback. It is information about where effort is required, where skill is missing, and where attention must be applied more precisely. Every system that improves relies on feedback. Muscles grow because resistance tears the fibers and signals the body to rebuild them stronger. Businesses grow because market resistance exposes inefficiencies that must be corrected. Individuals grow for the same reason. When something pushes back, it is identifying a constraint. That constraint is not there to humiliate you, it is there to guide you. The problem is not resistance itself, but the habit of personalizing it. When you treat resistance as failure, you respond emotionally. You either quit, complain, or look for validation. None of those reactions improve capability. When you treat resistance as data, your response changes. You become analytical. You ask what specifically is causing the friction. Is it a lack of skill, a lack of clarity, a lack of repetition, or a lack of discipline? Each form of resistance points to a different adjustment, and ignoring that signal guarantees stagnation. Resistance often appears at the exact point where leverage exists. The tasks that feel hardest are usually the ones that matter most. Easy actions rarely move the needle. Hard actions create disproportionate returns because they sit at the intersection of effort and impact. Resistance is the marker that you have found that intersection. Avoiding it means avoiding the very work that would produce meaningful progress. Another mistake people make is assuming resistance should disappear once they are good enough. In reality, resistance evolves rather than vanishes. Beginners face resistance from lack of knowledge. Intermediates face resistance from complexity. Advanced performers face resistance from scale and pressure. Each level introduces a new kind of friction, and each kind requires a new response. Expecting a frictionless path is a misunderstanding of how progress works. Resistance also reveals behavioral patterns that success demands you confront. Procrastination, perfectionism, impatience, and self-doubt all surface under pressure. These are not personality flaws, they're untrained responses. Resistance brings them into the open so they can be addressed. Without resistance, these weaknesses remain hidden and untreated, silently limiting performance. When people say they are stuck, what they usually mean is that they are receiving the same feedback repeatedly and refusing to change their approach. Resistance repeats until the lesson is learned. The moment you adjust, the resistance shifts. This is why progress accelerates after a breakthrough. It is not because the work became easier, but because you finally responded correctly to the feedback. Interpreting resistance as data also removes fear from the process. Failure stops being an identity threat and becomes a measurement. Missed targets become indicators. Slow progress becomes a signal to refine strategy or increase volume. This mindset allows consistency under pressure because emotions no longer dictate action. You move forward based on information, not feelings. The people who advance the fastest are not those who experience less resistance, but those who extract more value from it. They listen closely to where things break down, where effort spikes, and where results lag behind input. They make small, deliberate corrections instead of dramatic exits. Over time, this compounding responsiveness builds competence, confidence, and control, transforming resistance from an obstacle into a guide that continuously points toward the next level of performance and sustained growth. Effort is not just a requirement for success, it is the mechanism that determines who continues and who falls away. Every demanding goal has a natural filtering system built into it, and that filter is effort over time. The moment something requires sustained discipline, delayed gratification, and consistent execution without immediate reward, participation drops sharply. This is not accidental. Difficulty exists to separate those who are committed to the outcome from those who are merely attracted to the idea of it. Most people want the benefits without the burden. They admire the results, but they underestimate the cost. When they encounter the reality of the workload, the uncertainty, and the repetition, they reinterpret their desire as misalignment. They tell themselves it is not the right time, the right fit, or the right path. In truth, what they are reacting to is the realization that the process demands more than they are willing to give. Effort exposes the gap between intention and commitment. This separation happens quietly and early. It shows up in the small decisions that compound over time. Waking up when it is inconvenient, continuing when progress is invisible. Executing tasks that offer no praise, no recognition, and no immediate payoff. Each of these moments is a fork in the road. One path leads to gradual accumulation of capability. The other leads back to comfort and familiarity. Most people take the second path because it preserves energy and protects ego. The reason effort is such an effective separator is that it cannot be faked. Motivation fluctuates, talent varies, and circumstances change, but sustained effort requires a decision that must be renewed daily. There is no shortcut around this requirement. You either show up and do the work or you do not. Over time, this creates an undeniable divergence in outcomes. Those who continue build momentum. Those who stop remain static and then fall behind. Effort also eliminates comparison. At a certain level of work intensity, external noise fades. You stop worrying about what others are doing because you are fully occupied with the demands of your own process. This isolation is part of the separation. While others are distracted by trends, opinions, and shortcuts, those who persist are refining skills, increasing output, and developing resilience. The gap widens not because of superiority, but because of consistency under strain. Another aspect of this separation is psychological. As effort accumulates, identity shifts. You begin to see yourself as someone who follows through, someone who does not negotiate with discomfort. This self-perception reinforces behavior. The work becomes less about willpower and more about alignment with who you believe you are. Meanwhile, those who disengage reinforce a different identity, one built around rationalizing exits and seeking easier alternatives. Effort also protects outcomes. When success finally arrives, those who paid the full price are equipped to sustain it. They understand the systems, the sacrifices, and the standards required because they lived them. Those who look for shortcuts often reach a level they cannot maintain. Without the foundation built through effort, pressure collapses them. Separation through effort ensures not just achievement, but durability. This is why the path feels lonely. It is not because something is wrong, but because the filter is working. Every step that requires discipline reduces the number of people willing to walk alongside you. What remains is a smaller group, defined not by talent or luck, but by their willingness to endure the process longer than most, allowing effort to do its job of narrowing the field until only those prepared for the responsibility of progress remain. One of the most misunderstood aspects of meaningful success is the time gap between effort and reward. Most people intellectually understand that results take time, yet emotionally they expect confirmation far too soon. When progress does not show up quickly, doubt fills the silence. The work begins to feel pointless, not because it lacks value, but because the reward is delayed beyond what most people are prepared to tolerate. This impatience is what prevents long-term outcomes from ever materializing. Delayed rewards are not a flaw in the system, they are the system. They exist to ensure that only those willing to invest without immediate return continue forward. Early effort often produces nothing visible. Skills improve quietly. Systems stabilize invisibly. Foundations are laid below the surface. To the outside observer, and even to the person doing the work, it can appear as though nothing is happening. In reality, the most critical progress is occurring where it cannot yet be measured. The difficulty lies in the psychological cost of uncertainty. Working without feedback forces you to rely on belief rather than evidence. You must trust that today's actions will compound into tomorrow's outcomes, even when there is no proof. Most people are unwilling to operate in this space for long. They need reassurance, praise, or external validation to continue. When those signals are absent, motivation fades and effort slows, breaking the compounding process before it has a chance to work. Delayed rewards also demand emotional discipline. You must manage frustration, boredom, and self-doubt without letting them alter behavior. This is harder than managing physical fatigue. Anyone can push through exhaustion for a short period, but pushing through months or years of unremarkable progress requires a different level of control. It requires separating how you feel from what you do, continuing to execute even when the emotional payoff is non-existent. Another reason delayed rewards are so powerful is that they amplify advantage. Small differences in persistence create massive differences in outcome over time. Two people can start at the same point with the same resources. One quits after 6 months because the results are not fast enough. The other continues for 3 years. The gap between them is not 3 years of effort. It is the exponential effect of sustained action. Delayed rewards favor those who can wait. This waiting period also serves as preparation. The absence of reward forces you to refine your process rather than chase outcomes. You learn to chase outcomes. You learn to focus on inputs you control instead of results you cannot yet see. This builds a level of competence and stability that instant success rarely provides. When results finally arrive, they are supported by systems and habits strong enough to sustain them. The modern world makes delayed rewards harder to tolerate. Instant feedback is everywhere. Likes, notifications, and quick wins train the brain to expect immediate response. Against this backdrop, long-term effort feels unusually painful, but the very fact that most people avoid delayed gratification is what makes it valuable. The longer the reward is delayed, the fewer people remain willing to pursue it. Those who learn to endure delayed rewards develop a quiet confidence. They are no longer dependent on constant affirmation because their identity is tied to execution, not applause. They understand that the absence of results is not evidence of failure, but a normal phase of building something substantial. This perspective allows them to stay consistent when others panic, pivot, or quit, compounding effort while time does its work, eventually revealing outcomes that appear sudden to outsiders, but were earned through prolonged patience and sustained discipline. Every meaningful level of progress requires more than new strategies or increased effort. It requires a change in identity. You cannot consistently produce results that exceed the capacity of the person you currently are. This is why growth feels destabilizing. It threatens familiar patterns, beliefs, and self-perceptions that once felt sufficient. Pressure emerges not because the task is impossible, but because the old identity is no longer adequate for the demands being placed upon it. Most people attempt to grow by adding behaviors without upgrading the person performing them. They try to work harder while keeping the same standards, habits, and emotional responses. This creates internal conflict. The new goals demand discipline, focus, and resilience, while the existing identity resists those requirements. The friction you feel is the tension between who you have been and who you need to become. Until that identity shifts, progress will always feel forced and unsustainable. An identity shift begins with standards. Standards define what you tolerate, what you prioritize, and what you consider acceptable behavior from yourself. When pressure increases, low standards collapse. High standards hold. The process of raising standards is uncomfortable because it removes excuses. You can no longer blame circumstances, timing, or other people. Responsibility becomes unavoidable. This accountability is heavy at first, but it is also empowering because it restores control. Pressure also exposes emotional patterns that must change. Under stress, people default to familiar responses. Some avoid, some overthink, some seek reassurance, some quit. These reactions are not random, they are learned behaviors tied to identity. If you see yourself as someone who avoids conflict, pressure will amplify that tendency. If you see yourself as someone who follows through regardless of emotion, pressure will reinforce discipline. Growth requires deliberately reshaping these internal narratives so that your default response under strain aligns with your goals. Another aspect of identity shift is capacity expansion. Capacity is not just about time or energy. It is about what you can handle without breaking focus or consistency. Early on, pressure feels overwhelming because your capacity is limited. As you continue to operate under load, capacity increases. What once felt unbearable becomes manageable. This does not happen through thinking. It happens through exposure. Repeatedly choosing to stay present under pressure requires your tolerance for difficulty. This process also reshapes self-trust. Each time you endure pressure without retreating, you reinforce the belief that you can rely on yourself. This trust compounds. You stop negotiating with discomfort because you know you will follow through regardless. Confidence stops being an emotion and becomes a byproduct of consistent action. The work still feels demanding, but it no longer feels threatening. Identity shifts are often invisible from the outside. Others may only see results, but internally there is a redefinition of what is normal. Effort becomes expected. Discipline becomes routine. Pressure becomes familiar rather than alarming. This new baseline allows you to operate at a level that once seemed unreachable, not because the world changed, but because you did. The reason many people plateau is not lack of opportunity, but resistance to this internal transformation. They want new outcomes without surrendering old identities. But growth does not negotiate. It requires alignment. The person capable of handling greater responsibility, higher standards, and sustained pressure is not the person you start as. That version is built through repeated exposure to difficulty, deliberate response under stress, and the willingness to let go of who you were in order to operate as someone who can carry more weight, make harder decisions, and remain consistent when the demands exceed comfort. Most people believe progress is driven by motivation, but motivation is unreliable because it is emotional. It rises when conditions are favorable and disappears when discomfort appears. If action depends on feeling good, consistent execution becomes impossible. This is why persistence, not emotion, determines outcomes. Persistence is the ability to continue acting regardless of how you feel, and it is the defining trait behind every meaningful result. Emotions are reactive. They respond to feedback, uncertainty, fatigue, and fear. When results are slow, emotions turn negative. When effort feels heavy, emotions seek relief. Left unchecked, emotions become decision makers, and decisions made under emotional pressure almost always prioritize short-term comfort over long-term progress. Persistence overrides this tendency by separating action from internal state. You do the work because it is required, not because it feels rewarding. The critical shift happens when action becomes non-negotiable. At that point, feelings lose authority. You may feel tired, doubtful, bored, or frustrated, but none of those emotions alter behavior. This is not suppression. It is prioritization. Emotions are acknowledged but not obeyed. The work gets done first and emotions are dealt with afterward. This approach removes volatility from performance and replaces it with stability. Waiting to feel ready is another emotional trap. Readiness is an emotion disguised as logic. The belief that clarity or confidence must come before action keeps people stuck in preparation mode indefinitely. In reality, clarity follows action, not the other way around. Confidence is built through evidence, and evidence only comes from repeated execution. Persistence creates the conditions for confidence by producing proof over time. Emotional decision-making also exaggerates temporary states. A bad day feels like a bad direction. A slow week feels like a failed plan. Persistence corrects this distortion by anchoring behavior to a longer time horizon. Instead of reacting to momentary discomfort, persistent individuals evaluate trends. They understand that progress is uneven and that emotional lows are part of the process, not indicators of failure. Another advantage of persistence is predictability. When action is consistent, outcomes become more controllable. You may not be able to control results immediately, but you can control inputs. Persistence locks in those inputs. Over time, this reduces anxiety because progress no longer depends on mood. You know the work will be done regardless of how you feel, which removes internal negotiation and conserves mental energy. Persistence also compounds identity. Each time you act despite resistance, you reinforce the belief that you are someone who follows through. This self-perception becomes a stabilizing force. You stop asking whether you feel like doing the work because your identity answers the question for you. This eliminates friction at the point of action where most people stall. Emotion-driven individuals often confuse intensity with effectiveness. They work hard when inspired and stop when discouraged, creating bursts of effort followed by long gaps. Persistence favors moderate, sustained action. This consistency outperforms intensity over time. Small actions done repeatedly accumulate into significant outcomes, while sporadic effort resets progress repeatedly. The ability to persist through emotional discomfort is also what allows learning to take place. When frustration appears, most people disengage. Persistent individuals stay engaged long enough to adapt. They adjust strategy, refine skill, and improve execution instead of quitting. Emotion signals discomfort, but persistence extracts value from it. Ultimately, Success is built by people who stop asking how they feel and start acting based on what is required. They do not eliminate emotion, they deprioritize it. Feelings come and go, but standards remain. Work is completed even when enthusiasm is absent, and progress continues even when confidence wavers. This is how results are built quietly, steadily, and predictably through disciplined action repeated long after emotion has lost interest. Progress has a quiet side effect that few people warn you about. It changes your environment. As you grow, your priorities shift, your standards rise, and your tolerance for excuses decreases. These changes naturally create distance between you and people who choose comfort over challenge. This distance is often misinterpreted as a problem, when in reality it is evidence that growth is occurring. Most relationships are built on shared routines, shared struggles, and shared levels of ambition. When those levels change, friction appears. The conversations that once felt natural begin to feel repetitive. The activities that once felt enjoyable begin to feel unproductive. This is not arrogance or detachment, it is misalignment. Progress demands focus, and focus reduces availability. When you invest more energy into building, less energy remains for maintaining old patterns. Loneliness emerges not because you dislike people, but because fewer people understand the path you are on. The work you are doing often has no visible payoff yet, making it difficult to explain or justify to others. From the outside, it can look obsessive, unnecessary, or extreme. When those around you do not share the same long-term vision, their feedback often discourages rather than supports. This creates a natural pull toward isolation, not by choice but by necessity. This isolation tests commitment. When external validation disappears, you are left with only your internal standards. There are fewer compliments, fewer check-ins, and fewer shared milestones. Without reinforcement, many people second-guess themselves. They mistake the absence of company for the absence of correctness. But progress has never been a group activity. The early stages of anything meaningful are almost always solitary. The loneliness of progress also exposes dependence. It reveals how much motivation was previously borrowed from social approval. When that approval fades, you must either generate your own or retreat back to environments where your effort is normalized and unchallenged. Growth requires choosing the former. It requires building a relationship with your own discipline rather than outsourcing encouragement to others. Over time, this solitude becomes a strength. Without constant input, you think more clearly. Without constant comparison, you move more deliberately. You stop adjusting your pace to match others and start optimizing it for the outcome you want. This independence sharpens decision-making and strengthens resolve. What once felt isolating becomes clarifying. It is important to understand that this loneliness is temporary, but the growth it produces is permanent. As you continue, you eventually encounter others who have endured the same process. The connection formed at that level is deeper because it is based on shared standards, not shared comfort. These relationships are fewer, but stronger, and they are built on mutual respect rather than convenience. The mistake many people make is trying to drag others along to avoid feeling alone. This dilutes focus and breeds resentment. Growth cannot be negotiated or compromised to preserve familiarity. Those who truly belong in your future will meet you there through their own effort, not through your persuasion. Feeling alone on the path is not a signal to stop. It is a signal that you are ahead of the curve. Progress creates distance before it creates community. Enduring that distance is part of the price of becoming someone different from who you started as. Walking forward without applause, without reassurance, and without company, trusting that alignment will come later as a consequence of continued commitment to the work itself. Success is rarely built on bursts of effort. Most people overestimate what they can accomplish in a day and underestimate what can be achieved over months and years. The desire to go all in with extreme energy is often fueled by emotion, motivation, or urgency. But these spikes of intensity are rarely sustainable. They produce short-term results that feel significant, but over time, they create exhaustion, inconsistency, and regression. True progress favors steady, consistent action over sporadic brilliance. Consistency works because it compounds. Small actions repeated daily add up to exponential outcomes. Writing one page every day produces a book in months. Making one intentional decision about your health every day transforms your body over time. Taking one deliberate step toward your business or craft every day stacks into significant achievement. The key is that repetition reinforces habits, skills, and systems. Each repeated action becomes easier, faster, and more reliable, creating momentum that extreme, irregular effort cannot match. One reason intensity fails is that it is emotionally charged. When you rely on bursts of passion to drive action, you become dependent on mood. Some days you are motivated, some days you are not. The variability of motivation creates inconsistency, which interrupts compounding progress. Consistency, on the other hand, removes emotion from the equation. It makes effort predictable and results reliable, even when feelings fluctuate. The focus shifts from how I feel to what I do. which is far more controllable. Consistency also prevents burnout. Going all in repeatedly burns out energy reserves, reduces mental clarity, and often creates a perception that the work is too hard to maintain. Sustainable effort does not demand maximum output in every session. It demands enough action, repeated without fail, to build forward momentum. Over time, this creates a rhythm where effort feels manageable, sustainable, and natural, even when the work is hard. Another advantage of consistent action is learning. Skill development and understanding require repetition. When you attempt to do too much at once, you spread attention thin, reduce the opportunity for reflection, and make mistakes more costly. Consistency allows for incremental improvements. Each repetition provides feedback. Each adjustment builds competence. Learning compounds alongside effort, producing mastery that sporadic intensity cannot deliver. Consistency also stabilizes discipline. Motivation is volatile, but habits are reliable. When you commit to showing up every day, even at a minimal level, you reinforce the standard that action is non-negotiable. This builds identity. You start seeing yourself as someone who works steadily regardless of how you feel, and that identity becomes a self-reinforcing loop. Over time, the action becomes automatic, almost inevitable, because it is no longer dependent on fluctuating energy levels. The world rewards persistence over flashiness. The person who delivers results slowly but consistently will almost always outperform someone who tries to sprint in bursts and then collapses. This is why consistency separates the majority from the few. Most people give up when the initial excitement fades, but those who maintain steady effort continue to accumulate advantage. Consistency also protects against external disruption. Life is unpredictable. Motivation ebbs, emergencies occur, and energy dips. If your progress depends on extreme effort alone, any disruption derails your results. Consistent effort creates a foundation that is resilient. Even on low energy days, progress continues, and setbacks are easier to recover from because the system is designed to withstand variability. Ultimately, intensity is seductive because it feels meaningful in the moment, but it is unreliable. Consistency, repeated action over time, is where the real work is done. It builds skill, habit, identity, and results, all while reducing volatility and increasing predictability. Consistency turns effort into momentum, momentum into progress, and progress into outcomes that seem extraordinary only because they were quietly stacked day after day, without fanfare, without drama, and without dependence on fleeting emotion. Mastery in any field, whether personal, professional, or physical, requires an unusual relationship with discomfort. Most people spend their lives avoiding it, treating hard work, criticism, and pressure as signals to retreat. They interpret difficulty as danger when, in reality, discomfort is the environment in which growth occurs. The moment you stop resisting it and start operating within it deliberately, you unlock a level of capability that most people never reach. Being comfortable with discomfort does not mean enjoying it. It does not mean seeking pain for its own sake. It means recognizing that discomfort is inevitable on the path to meaningful progress and choosing to persist regardless. The difference between those who succeed and those who quit often comes down to this. The former learn to tolerate strain, uncertainty, and difficulty long enough to see results, while the latter allow the momentary unpleasantness to dictate action. Discomfort is feedback. It tells you where you are stretching beyond your current limits. When tasks feel heavy, when outcomes are uncertain, or when progress is slower than desired, these sensations are not failures, they are signals. They indicate that you are operating in the zone where improvement is actually occurring. Avoiding discomfort keeps you within the boundaries of what you already know, ensuring safety but preventing growth. Choosing to stay present within that tension expands your capacity for future challenges. Repeated exposure to discomfort builds resilience. Each time you endure stress, long hours, rejection, or criticism, you incrementally expand what you can tolerate. Over time, situations that once felt overwhelming begin to feel manageable. What felt impossible yesterday becomes routine today. This process reshapes both skill and identity because it forces adaptation. You stop seeing obstacles as threats and start seeing them as opportunities to prove what you are capable of handling. Becoming comfortable with discomfort also strengthens decision-making. When you are no longer controlled by the fear of pressure, uncertainty, or difficulty, your choices become deliberate rather than reactive. You stop avoiding what is hard and start prioritizing what matters. Risk assessment shifts from, can I handle this emotionally, to, is this necessary to achieve the outcome? This clarity enables consistent action, even in the face of pressure, as it is guided by principle rather than emotion. Another aspect of mastering discomfort is redefining what success means. Most people measure progress by how easy it feels, expecting comfort as proof of alignment. In reality, Comfort is usually the opposite of progress. Those who become comfortable with discomfort learn to measure success by execution, persistence, and growth, regardless of how difficult the process feels. They understand that meaningful outcomes rarely feel easy while they are being created. Discomfort also teaches patience and perspective. Growth is rarely linear, and the process often requires enduring periods of monotony, incremental setbacks, and slow improvement. By accepting discomfort as part of the journey, you reduce the emotional volatility that comes with delayed gratification. You learn to keep moving even when results are invisible, because you trust the process itself, not immediate feedback. Finally, operating within discomfort creates a competitive advantage. Most people avoid it, which leaves opportunities untouched, challenges unmet, and potential unrealized. By willingly entering situations that feel difficult, uncomfortable, or uncertain, you position yourself ahead of the majority. You develop strength, skill, and resilience that others cannot access because they avoid the very environment in which it is forged. Choosing discomfort is a deliberate act. It requires a mindset that values growth over ease, execution over emotion, and long-term capability over short-term comfort. Once this mindset is internalized, discomfort is no longer an obstacle, but a predictable, unavoidable environment that shapes competence, identity, and results in ways that nothing else can. Remember, growth is not polite. It does not wait for comfort, motivation, or permission. It challenges you, stretches you, and tests you in ways that feel unbearable at times. Every ounce of resistance, every moment of doubt, every second of struggle is not a signal to quit. It is proof that you are moving in the right direction. If it feels hard, if it feels heavy, if it feels uncomfortable, lean into it. Persist when no one is watching. Execute when emotions tell you to stop. Embrace the loneliness, the delayed results, the relentless pressure, and the daily grind. Because on the other side of that discomfort is the person, the skill, the life, and the results that most people will never have the courage to pursue. The work is hard, but the reward is unmatched. And it begins with one simple choice: to show up no matter what and keep moving forward.